Abuja Magwaba about the POG media so near Satina senior tenacity and I just say yo my Ghana a political headlines in B and a be abo a rare up no so I answer yaji say a yaji penny said by some of my Ghana ewo a POG media so now was who the echo and the air banner ewo oh my Ghana muna measure says and a day the kind of the budget medi as well and the enobo class so also subscribe to a POG political media no na onsa so etimi aka ye daily headlines ni bi na wo de eko na ye bo e de wan nsem ma na ye bo e de ewra ensem a ye de former ye EC boss e de ewra to dwa maame Charlotte Oseya NPP ye eba by no so etimi in free office every place you know it Jane Mensa na we na odin simbi we to dwa efa threat na chese eno so eba so na o chem se threat na eba so na chese ono kra de na nka oyo okay because onim se adwuma na ono so de niti akwhya ase no BBC so ebetimi happen na here is the case say threat na so timi call ne maso ene na busua ene nipa a nso na adɔfo ɔmo nkyɛn ɔmo so ɔno nso dɔ ɔmo no ɔno na ayɛ ɔmo saa nkɔfokuo yi na saa threat yi ɛso etimi ɛkɔ no so na ɔkɔtena ase democratic meeting bi ase na kyerɛ sɛ ɔno nso kɔ yi saa nsɛm yi go na ɔde edin a na kyerɛ sɛ ɛhyɛ saa threat no nyinaa so akyi ɛde gu dwa abusua mɛsɛ sɛ ɛbɛgye brɛ na yɛabɔ ɛde ewura saa nsɛm yi bi ase.
Coming up next here on Ghana Tonight, the former Electoral Commission chairperson, Madam Charlotte Osei, has revealed the personal threats and attacks she endured while serving as Ghana's Electoral Commissioner, including an attempt by political party supporters to set her father's house on fire. Yeah, that's the extent of the threats that she was faced with. Now, this is a matter that has generated some reactions, concerns, and also suggestions to ensure that there is some level of safety for actors in this particular sensitive offices. And she has indicated that, in fact, she was speaking at the 2025 Democracy Dialogues in Accra, organized by the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, that's the former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Charlotte Osei described her experience as both difficult and deeply personal during that period as the chair of the Electoral Commission. Take a look.
I wouldn't say the phone calls and the pressure were the issues. Most people know I'm quite stubborn. So the kind of calls you think I received, I probably did not even receive because they knew I would not be amenable. The cost was really on a very personal level, attacks on my family, concerns about the safety of my children and my wider family. There were a lot of lies, and so the whole fabric of the family was affected. It's either they were worrying for themselves or they were constantly worrying about your own safety. My dad was still alive at the time, so that created other challenges. There was a time that a political party mob surrounded my dad's house, that they were going to burn it down because of actions they felt I had taken. So those were the kinds of personal pressures that, as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, as a wife, as a sister, you have to deal with. So those ones were more worrying than the pressure of people calling you to say, do this. I mean, if they say do it and it's not in line with the law, it's an easy answer. I wouldn't do it because it's not in line with the law. So that didn't really bother me too much.
That's troubling to say the least. That's Madam Charlotte Osei, the former chairperson of the Electoral Commission of the Republic of Ghana. And thankfully, I've been joined on Zoom by Professor POG Media. He's a governance expert, former senior advisor to the United Nations on governance matters. He's joining us on Zoom right now. Professor POG Media, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. And you were there at this Democracy Dialogues 2025, organized by the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation. That was yesterday, and we sat on the same row. You hear Charlotte Osei make that concern about how political actors sometimes can take their passion to a different level, and the threats that she was exposed to as a result of doing her work as chair of the Electoral Commission to the extent of facing threats in her family as well. A late father, political party supporters surrounded his house, threatening to burn it down. Concerning, to say the least, is it not?
Absolutely. It's a very critical point about elections, not only in Ghana, but I think across the African continent. So far, if you look at elections across the continent, all the time we do hear of incidents of violence in different ways, some serious, some not so serious, attempts to subvert the integrity of the process, many, many things. So elections being critical to democratic practice, I think needs to be sanitized in such a way that outcomes will not be contested by competing political parties. So I do agree that elections require special attention in all emerging democracies.
And it's a very, very important issue that you break about what has been, and Prof, if you could kindly reposition it for me, because there's a little break in the connection to you, so that we have some clarity to the point that you were making. But then you reference the safety and the integrity of elections. It's an important point because Madam Charlotte Osei made reference and in fact raised concern about what in her view the continental bodies, the ECOWAS and the AU can do and should do to protect the integrity of elections. And this is it. She indicated that one, in her view, ECOWAS and the AU hide behind quiet diplomacy in the face of flawed elections and constitutional manipulation, while showing greater boldness in condemning military takeovers. I mean, this is one that has to be paid attention to. I ask this because you have been a member of a number of these ECOWAS groups that go to monitor elections, election observers, AU election observers, ECOWAS election observers. You've been part of them. What else has to be done beyond the quiet diplomacy that we see the sub-regional and the continental body engage in when it comes to elections?
I have participated in international election observation for some time, not recently, but between 2000, in fact, between 1997 and 2008. I've been to at least 6 or 7 or 8 African countries, and I've seen different ways African countries have these elections. And I'm also a participant in international observer groups, not the ECOWAS, but I have participated in the Commonwealth group, at least 2 big countries. Then this organization in Washington, NDI, have been with them to observe elections in about 3 or so other African countries. But let me say that the way I see it, what is of prime importance to these observer groups is to ensure peace in these countries where we go to observe. So that even at times when there's evidence of gross violations of the electoral rules, seldom will you have these groups coming out boldly to condemn them for the sake of not, provoking violence or provoking the anger of government, opposition parties, or wherever. So they are always acting in a kind of a moderate way in order not to. Because certainly, I'm not sure of any African country where electoral conduct has not been, at least there have not been any attempts to manipulate or to influence one way or the other. So the priority of election observers, the groups like you mentioned, ECOWAS, AU, as well as the Commonwealth, which I used to work with them, I think that is the truth from my perspective. But having said that, it's also important that these groups find a way to help these countries to overcome the challenges of elections, not merely to wait and go on observe and make pronouncements, because they know too well the deficits in electoral systems in most African countries. Look, when I was in Cameroon back in August 2004, I was sent by the Commonwealth the system in place in Cameroon is the strangest system I've ever seen. But I was sent by the Commonwealth to go support they call it National Election Observatory, to train the officers and help them to develop some models for deployment of observers and all. But looking at the electoral system, you can understand why since 1982, President Biya has been in power till today. When I went there, he was just around 73, 74 years old. As we speak,
like you made a message or bejopo like that's all subscribing so yeah POG political media as well any day and will go so bejopo subscription no white notification bell no now also wait me a share no for so answer so at me a can of echo any day air banana I will on my Ghana Munama make us wait me so abo the rather comment section or also wait me adding come on a POG a brand and brand and remember near I said the bear jumedi no and so it makes me interactive now in summer a year mamma Charlotte say edit two journal and a year opinion pon we so edit a year na dwenhwɛ ɛde fa a ɛyɛ saa attractive no ɔma ne yɛ nyanteaseɛ sɛ ɛyɛ saa attractive deɛ ɛyɛ common ɛna ɛnyɛ Ghana pɛ ɛyɛ saa adwuma no a ɛyɛ ɛwɔ saa no EC office adwuma no sɛ woyɛ na sɛ woamma w'ani anda hɔ a ɛyɛ saa attractive ne saa nneɛma ɛbɛtumi ama watake decision bi a ɛno nso ɛnyɛ fɛ abusua mɛyɛ sɛ ɛbɛtoa so na yɛtie nsɛm no.
The man is 93 years old and he's seeking re-election this coming October. So ask yourself, how is it possible for this man to win every single election in the country? It's all because of the system they have created. So if I'm interested in going to help Cameroon, I'll be interested in helping them to recraft the system. Of course, if the government will allow that, you see. So I'm citing this example to illustrate how problematic some of these electoral systems are. That's one thing. The other thing, though, having said that, it's also important to understand that the presence of election observers by itself is very crucial for certain countries to have discipline. When I was in Zimbabwe, May 2000, that is when the so-called veterans, the militants were beating and killing the so-called white farmers. Whenever we appeared on any farm where there was that trouble, everything was quiet. And even those we met who were so-called the veterans, they would come and say, oh, no, we are not beating anybody. They were pleading. So it also taught me that, in fact, the presence of international observers in certain countries, perhaps not in all countries, in certain countries do help to bring some peace and calm to these areas. So I think, one, it depends on the political system or the electoral system in place. And then, of course, the people and their parties and their politicians had also played a game. But I will not rule out the importance of these observers, but I do agree with Madam said, that in fact, these observer groups, especially the ECOWAS and the AU, should begin to focus more on the systems that are in place and engage the political parties and their leaders prior to the elections for a certain basic understanding to occur. I know in Ghana, for instance, during Charles' tenure, ECOWAS came and met the party, their leadership and all. I know, and even forcing them to sign a peace agreement as if that would prevent violence or conflict or anything of the sort. But these are some of the efforts these groups make to ensure that there is peace during and after the elections.
I see. And you reference Cameroon, that Cameroon you say is the strangest experience you've ever had as an election observer. Many who have expressed very real concerns about what is happening. But that country is not alone when you talk about those strange things you experienced. Is democracy under threat on the continent with what we are seeing now?
I did listen to some of the comments of President Mira, the Democracy Dialogue, which was hosted by a Good Luck's Foundation from Nigeria. And I can understand why the president will say that. Why he say it can collapse if you don't take care. Because, look, Even a country like United States, that used to be the model for most of us, today is under more serious threat than even democracies in African countries. The reason why perhaps we are all concerned is that, at least from my perspective, we started on the wrong footing. We embraced democracy without question. Our forefathers who fought for our independence and embraced democratic practice immediately did not examine the whole system in terms of its practice to determine what needs to be changed, modified, and what needs to be adapted or adopted, and so on and so forth. We just took it and embraced it. If I look at the challenges of democracy today, I'm quick to say, look, perhaps we made certain fundamental issues here. When you talk of a system that is itself divisive, especially if you adopt democratic practice and decide to create within it the practice to be exclusive, that is to say, a winner takes all. Knowing too well the kind of history, the kind of culture and traditions that you have, and with no regard to that, and the people that you are going to rule over, then democracy is going to deepen the divisions that we have. So for me, when in our country, our dear country, when we are struggling to find responses to certain political challenges and all, I say, look at the system we have. You cannot bring to this a society such as Ghana, especially most South African countries, DRC and others that have had serious conflicts, where you solve the problem by imposing democracy, which says, if I win 51, everything is mine, and you have to go to be in opposition for 4 or 5 years. I mean, that is not, for me, it doesn't make sense, given the conditions and the circumstances of this particular country. So in the same way, I'm saying that perhaps right from the beginning, if we have the presence of mind, we could have decided to examine, put democratic practice into critical kind of analysis without needlessly going to the West and adapting their practice and just using them in a situation where things are different. And by the way, let me be clear. I am not doubting the relevance of democracy. I'm here talking about democratic practice, which is different from democratic principles. The principles are universal. The practice must be according to your circumstance, your history, your culture, and everything. Today, as we speak, everybody is beginning to see, with the upsurge of traditional leadership in this country, that in itself could be a threat to the way we practice our democracy. Democracy that centralizes power at the center and make all the other places dependent almost exclusively on the center. That is to say, having such a strong executive that even in the districts, nothing functions without, getting something from the central government. So I think we have to be looking at these things to ensure that when we talk of democratic practice in its true sense, we should be looking at the grassroots democracy where people in their own localities will have the capacity to determine to a large extent their own destiny in terms of their development and other things, rather than everything being cooked in Accra and then being dished out to all parts of the country. That's why people are now so dependent on the central government. So dependent.
Indeed.
President Mahama, during his first tenure, went to Western region somewhere. I remember this vividly because for me it was very striking. On his tour, somewhere in the Western region, as you know, at the Deba, the chief will stand up and plead with the president what they need and all. What this of mine he told the president, President Mahama, this is during his first tenure, was that, Mr. President, my people, even where we can go and leave our leg, that is to say toilet, like the Kujai night, that town was asking a president of the republic for what? For toilets. And the president cleverly told the Omani, Nana, this one, they go to your district assembly. They are responsible for that. But the fact that the chief asked the president for toilet meant that the district assembly has not been providing that for them. You see, so if the president means it, then it means that we have to take decentralization seriously so that people in their own localities can be empowered to take charge of their development rather than falling on the central government all the time for their progress.
And I do appreciate
These
this.
are some of the deficits I find in democracy.
The kind of system that we're practicing. I do appreciate this. Very important issues that you raised there. Professor Bafo Ajimendia, thank you so much. Thank you for doing this diagnosis for us and the attention that needs to be paid to the deficiencies that you identified in there. Fortunately, we're in the process of reviewing our constitution as whether these issues you identified will find some attention in them is one that we'll see how the coming days will play out. Thank you. He is a governance expert and also a former United Nations senior advisor on governance. Professor Bafo Ajimendia, thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Coming up next.
That's it. So coming home, I bought Edward Media. Say POG Media. They ban a Ghana authentic political headlines. A POG Media personal on sabeti me account. One who the air code and the air banning now. I will on my Ghana. Muna so subscribe still a message so drop a subscription. Now white notification bell. Now also I share the amount now also who the air code and the air bar with me so about. And the rather comment section now also waiting me do come on. I remember about me that's it. So J Bre, Edema POG Media, best